Welcome back. We are continuing with the story My Grandmother's Life. In the last chapter, we talked about the Depression years and how it was so hard on every family. We're going to cover a couple of chapters today, maybe even 3. We're going to start out with chapter 12, For Hire. Eventually, times got better, and he was hired into the River Rouge plant, Ford Motor Company, as an oiler. He had the responsibility of keeping the assembly line machines running smoothly. Julia continued on as a domestic with regular customers, like Mrs. Higgins, who was Dr. Proud's nurse. Julia was only 4'10" and rarely weighed over 100 pounds, but she was a good worker and she had the knack of getting along with everyone. Many times she was hired out as a practical nurse for neighbors and friends with new babies or sudden illness. She was ahead of her time in childcare, keeping all 4 of her brood regularly dewormed with a candy-like medicine she purchased in one of the shops in Hamtramck. She also dosed them daily with cod liver oil and a syrup called Father John's. This came in a brown bottle and was sweet and pleasing to take. She was proud of her Singer treadle sewing machine and made a lot of the children's clothes. In those days, flour and chicken feed were sold in cloth bags which were printed in pleasing floral designs to attract the country or the farm housewife. Millions of these bags were opened out flat and turned into curtains, dresses, dish towels, and whatever the seamstress needed. Julia made good use of her collection by making them into quilt covers. The plain ones became dish towels. Manufacturers offered prizes inside of boxes of many kinds of household products. Julia accumulated a set of cereal bowls by purchasing large boxes of Quaker oats. A dish would be in every box, and she prepared the oatmeal with dates to give them extra flavor and nourishment. Just what country children needed to start a busy school day. Some soap products gave away dish towels with each box, and Julia put those to use as well. Chapter 13, PTA. As the children grew, Julia involved herself in school and civic activities. She chauffeured them to and from school in bad weather in the family 2-door Dodge coupe. There was a toolbox on one end of the back seat, just right for a youngster to sit on and see all around. One winter day, as she approached Maple Grove School, she braked and sent the coupe into a complete spin on a sheet of ice. The children thought that was great fun, and fortunately no one was hurt. On mornings when they had to walk the 1.5 miles to school, she made them put on long underwear. They thought they knew better, so as soon as they were out of her line of vision, they would stop and roll up the legs and sleeves so they wouldn't be teased at school. She faithfully attended the PTA meetings at Maple Grove and was active in writing to congressmen and the state representative about issues that concerned her children. She arranged transportation for all the children to be trucked to a county-wide musical presented by the children. One year, they were all taught the Highland Fling and the Sailor Hornpipe dances. First, they learned to dance in unison at their own schools, and then came the trucking. And I mean open farm trucks she had commandeered from all over the countryside to locations where several schools could practice together. After the teachers were satisfied with their proficiency, all of the Wayne County pupils were again trucked to the state fairgrounds in Detroit, where they wore Scottish costumes made by the mothers. Hundreds of elementary school youngsters lined up in the arena as bagpipes began to play, and the children put on a magnificent performance for thousands of spectators and parents. Those truck rides were a real treat for a bunch of country kids. They could peek over the side rails and wave to curious bystanders. Besides, if you were giggling and jostling about in the truck, you weren't stuck behind a school desk pushing a pencil and being quiet at the teacher's command. Other activities that Julia supported were the box socials. These were money-raising affairs for the PTA. For weeks in advance, the girls and women of the Maple Grove School District would spend hours in secret decorating shoe boxes, or ones of similar size, with fancy crepe paper, ribbons, or whatever else they could find. Usually an elaborate theme was chosen, like a garden with rose arbors or butterflies in a flower bed. The sky was the limit, and the fancier the better. The night of the social, the boxes were filled with delicious lunch for 2. Fried chicken was a favorite, and potato salad and homemade pastries were always a big hit. wrapped carefully with paper so no one could see who brought which box. They were lined up on a table on the stage. The stage, which was a platform the men had built under the teacher's desk in the front of the room. There was no auditorium in this tiny 3-room school in 2 buildings, so for special occasions such as the socials, the temporary platform on sawhorses served as a stage so that everyone could see what was going on. When the auction began, the men and boys were to bid on the boxes. And there was spirited bidding, and then when the final bid was made and the girl or woman identified, the buyer had to pay an additional fee determined by the size of her waist. There was much whispering going on, the men and boys trying to guess who belonged to which box. Of course, if a girl had a beau, she would let him know what her design looked like. Mrs. Walkenbach, the teacher for grades 6, 7, and 8, was always teased about her contribution to the fundraising as she weighed over 200 pounds with no visible waistline. When all the boxes were sold and the waistlines measured and paid for, they settled down for a merry feast with the PTA providing drinks, coffee for the adults and pop for the children. Lucille's box and lunch were always winners for the purchaser, but never brought in much money since her waistline was scarcely a shadow. I think that's cute because my aunt wrote this. So she was able to put some of her own personal touches in this story. I think we're going to stop there, but I thank you so much for following along. We'll continue with chapter 14 soon. But in the meantime, if there's any episodes that you've missed, I've created a playlist called My Grandmother's Life, so you can go back there and catch up on all episodes.